and we believe that we need to spread awareness. Coming back to the topic, so this is what I'm trying to do. I will just try to take you through some of the very important but the basic things about informed consent. And of course, you are most welcome to ask your questions. You can ask me anytime. You can put it in the chat or you can wait till the end as you wish. I would try my best to answer all of them. But again, let me also tell you that I'm not a know-all. So while we have experience, while I have read through, but then there may be times where I would say that I will get back or I would probably find answers or I do not know. So, and whatever I'm sharing today is based on whatever I have experienced, whatever I have read, and this is my interpretation. So a disclaimer that it does not have any kind of relation with any of the affiliations that I carry. So with that, let me start and tell you again, as researchers, we have to understand two fundamental things. One, any research that we do, that has to have informed consent when we deal with the participants directly or take some data from them. Second, we don't let any research start before we get the approval of the ethics committee. These two are important things I want everybody to understand. And informed consent, when we say, then there is a process. So that's what I will tell you about today. Before I go into that, let me just ask you, or stimulate you a bit. And I'll take you through some of the case studies. Some of you probably might have seen these, but then let's discuss this and let's see how we do and what are the answers that we can come to. So Dr. Balaji, I'll request and I solicit your help when it comes to chat, because I've just, closed that screen so that it's easier for me to visualize this whole full
Surely, sir.
screen. Okay.
Yeah, we can.
So
I will
yeah,
collect all the information over
yeah,
the chat. At
and
the
you can
last,
just
we
tell
can
me.
discuss.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even now, if there are any responses, I'll just ask people to respond. If you want, I can open, but then again, it comes in between, so I just minimize that and it's out of my
No
window.
worries,
But yeah.
sir. No worries.
Right. So this is one of the first case that I'm putting up, and I want you to tell me the participants. See, this is a case of an 81-year-old lady who's an Alzheimer's patient. She's named Mrs. Franklin. Now she's supposed to take part in a clinical trial on a new drug which will help improve memory. You were part of the team, and you were present when the clinical investigator obtained a signed informed consent from her a few days ago, and you visit her today and say that tomorrow we're going to begin this trial, and are you ready? Are you okay? Everything fine? And she gives you a blank stare, and she's like, excuse me, I have no clue what you're talking about. So what are your thoughts? What do you think? Any thoughts? Do you think what should be done now, or do you have any other thoughts which go into this? Any thoughts? Then you're most welcome to put it in the chat.
Please go ahead, guys. You can put it in the chat. I can convey to Dr. Animesh. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. No, come
Or
on,
if you
it's
want, you
okay.
can yeah, let it be interactive.
Yes,
Let's make it
yes,
interactive
yes,
because
yes.
we always
Absolutely.
like our webinars
As
to be very interactive. Yeah.
Yes,
good evening.
yes.
As the patient is Alzheimer's, so for certain conditions, we required a family and impartial witness. We required
Okay,
a legal acceptable representative. We required
okay,
at them for.
okay. So thank you for answering. And then, I appreciate that. So you said two things. One, you said in certain conditions, we require a family member. The next thing that you said was impartial, right? Impartial person. Now, can you clarify what do you mean
Yes,
by that impartial person?
it's in the sense impartial witness. Like if the subject wasn't with any legal acceptable representative, legal authoritative representative, then the PI should consider legal impartial witness.
Right, right. So impartial witness is the term, and so you're right. Any reasons why do we not take it from her and you want to take from, you said, family member?
But the reason we can take with her, but considering the condition of Alzheimer's
Hmm.
and for these kind of conditions, we can't expect the patient to like have a thorough knowledge of all those things. So she's an 81-year-old a patient and with Alzheimer's. So we can't consider that she can have all the knowledge regarding this. That we can't consider that she understood all these things and she can carry out throughout the trial. So we need someone uh, from family like legally authorized representative or some impartial witness
Okay.
for
Right.
ethical standards.
Thank you. Thank you. I think what you said is, yeah, partially and most of it is correct. So we'll park it for a moment. But what you said is you want the family member to come in and then give consent. Let's look at the second one. Now, this also happened in many of these academic settings, especially, and even sometimes in some labs and others. So there was already a tissue sample which was collected. There was a purpose for the research which was being done. And now there are tissue samples which are left behind, and the investigator wants to extend the research and wants to do something which was not initially thought about and has not been obviously taken consent for. So now this person wants to actually perform additional analysis. Do you think that you need to have additional consent or explicit consent for the next thing that we are planning? Do we need another consent? First thing is yes, no. How many of you think that yes, we require another consent? How many of you think that's not required? I mean, it's fine. What difference it makes?
All answers are pointing positive. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So why do you think we require this? I mean, we already have samples. We have taken the consent. So why do we need the consent again?
I think Arpita has told ICMR says it.
Okay, that's nice. Let me twist this scenario a bit. Okay. Thank you guys with me. So, let me twist it a bit. Now, I say that these samples were preserved maybe 5, 7 years or say 10 years back. And now today you want to take consent. I'm sure you'll agree that if you had say 200 people, let's say arbitrarily, or say even 100 people, do you think you can get back to all of them and get consent? Is it possible? If not, what do you do? How do you go about taking consent if you're telling me that yes, I should take consent? Now I say that this was 10 years back and today I want to do it. Of course, I've twisted the scenario from what is projected, but I hope you understand.
Seems like a good twist, sir.
Okay. What is a good decision? We still go and take the consent? If I can't reach out to them, what do I do? Is there a way? I hope I'm stimulating you guys enough. I hope you're with me and I hope you're finding this interesting. All right, so let's move on. Now, this is another scenario. In this case, there is a school health checkup which is usually done. In this case, it's a dental I brought in so that we can cater to different disciplines. So here, this is a part of the routine survey, but what is being done is along with that, we want to build in some kind of a research component. And these are children of class 3 to 5, among whom we want to check how is their oral health, what is the prevalence of dental caries. And to do this, we're not doing anything extra, but what we are doing is we are just asking the parents for their consent and we are sending information home through the school to all the parents. And we say, okay, we will maintain utmost anonymity and confidentiality. We are telling you what is going to happen. We're just collecting that data because what's being done is a part of the routine. If you do not want your child to be a participant in this, if you do not want us to take the data of your child, please sign this form and return it within say next 2 days or what. If you do not return it, we will assume that your child is a participant, we'll take his data. Of course, we are not going to project anybody's data in isolation. It will be a group data, but this is what. So do you think this is acceptable in the first place? Or do you think you would like the researcher to take explicit consent for this particular research? Yes?
Yeah, go ahead, guys. Answers are welcome. Not acceptable.
Not acceptable. Good. Okay, let's hear from others. somebody says not acceptable, let's not get carried away. We have to think about our own mind, and then we have to respond. So I agree, and I appreciate the opinion expressed. But let's, I'm not going to say what's right, what's wrong. We'll come to these, but I'm just trying to stimulate you guys so that you understand the whole thing. You feel that this is useful, this is interesting. Yes.
Arpita says also it is not acceptable.
Not acceptable. Good.
There was one reply that says we'll connect to parents or trying to connect. Yeah,
Okay.
they're trying to connect with parents. Yeah.
Okay, but I've already sent the form home, right? And I've explained. So I've already connected with parents. Let's see that, let's say that, I'm the researcher. So I've already sent. And I've said that, you have all the right to refuse. And you just need to sign and send. In case you don't, I assume that you are letting your child participate.
Dr. Surya says any research which includes children, the assent form has to be signed by parents.
Excellent. I agree with you. So we'll remember this word assent.
Yeah. Then Dr. Mahesh Kumar says regulatory agency will not accept the trial.
Okay. Okay. So let's remember the trial word. Let's remember assent. I think we'll move on. Okay. So now this is a little more sensitive issue. We have a research which is a qualitative research. Now, please remember, qualitative research is not merely numbers, but we are trying to look at a lot of other things like, what's the lived experience? What are the challenges? It's more of, a one-to-one interview or a focus group discussion and things like that. So in this, we are trying to look at why does something happen? What's the phenomenon? How does it happen? What's the reason for success? Things like that. It's not just merely numbers. And in this, the commercial sex workers in this particular research is the participants, and we are looking at the practice of safe sex and what they know about and things. And the researcher has requested that grant me a waiver of consent. Okay, that means I do not want to take the consent, waiver of consent. You give me a waiver. I don't want to have that consent in this. Do you think in the first place this is acceptable? If you were on the IEC, that is Institutional Ethics Committee, or what we call in the Western parlance as Institutional Review Board, would you accept it? Would you approve it? Do you not think that the researcher must take an explicit consent for this particular research? So again, your answers.
I'm waiting.
Okay. Let's see.
Somebody says yes.
What is yes? Is this acceptable? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's the first question. Is this acceptable?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So can the IEC approve this? So yes, I assume, I presume. Anything other than that?
Not. Arpita says EC will approve it. So yes, but Rashmi differs saying not acceptable, and Mahesh Kumar also says not acceptable.
Okay, so we have a lot of discordant voices. Yeah, please go ahead.
The waiver of documentation is permissible, like when the consent document would be only record linking the subject to research and principal risk of harm to the subject. When there would be a breach of confidentiality, is the waiver of consent is permissible.
I didn't get you. How do you connect the waiver of confidentiality? I mean, sorry, the breach of confidentiality with waiver of consent? I didn't get that part.
Like when the signature on the informed consent document would be the only record linking to the subject and to the research.
Okay.
So, and the principal harm to the subject would be breach of confidentiality.
So usually that's what we do, right? We will, after explaining everything and all, we reach a mutuality of agreement, and then what we do is we ask them to sign, right? So I didn't get your point. See, you said that's the signature will be the only thing, and then you said the breach of confidentiality. So I didn't get that connect.
Like with this breach of confidentiality, if this harms the research subject, then the EC can give waiver for consent. In my knowledge, I don't know.
Okay. Okay, good. So you say that, okay, in this case, there is a possibility of harm to the research participant. And in such a case, probably you can get a waiver of consent from the IAC, right? That's what you said. Okay, great.
Yes.
So
yes.
yeah, so let's so that's also like, good. I'm happy that at least you're responding and coming out with your suggestions, your answers. Okay, this is the last one. So now what is happening is there is an academic physician or a person who's a faculty in some of the institutes, and then he or she sees an unusual case and wants to publish this, okay, in a journal or report this somewhere in a journal. So this is to be sent to a journal as a manuscript. Now, do you think this requires consent from the patient? It's a routine clinical patient. The person has seen this physician has already seen the patient, found the case very interesting and says, no, this has to, because this will add to the evidence level that we have, and it will help the community to grow their scientific body of knowledge. So do you think this requires a consent from the patient? Yes, I'm waiting. So this is the last case we will discuss, and then we'll go into.
Answer is yes.
Okay.
Somebody says.
All right. Anything else? But why?
Consent is required if patient details are mentioned in it. That was told by someone.
Okay, so let me say that, I'll not mention the patient name. I'll not mention details. I'll just say the so and like, say so and so I mean, say XYZ patient from say Beltangadi, 35-year-old male came, and then this is the history and all that. You don't know who's this Beltangadi patient from, and who's this XYZ 35-year-old male. I'm not mentioned. So, and I've already taken, see, he's already consented to me for treatment. I've already been treating this person. He's my patient. So do you still think that this is required? Are you getting my point? Yes. Do you think still?
It is not required. A subject is not a part of any trial related activities.
All right. Okay.
And somebody says pharmacovigilance cases are all about the same.
So I didn't get that point. So pharmacovigilance cases.
I think she's meaning the post-marketing. Once the drug hits the market and you get reports of adverse events, so you call it as post-marketing surveillance reports.
No, that's fine. Yeah, but then how does that connect here?
I don't know.
Yeah, because I'm talking about a routine patient care. Yeah.
Yeah, Arpita, can you explain that? What was told? It is an interesting answer that you gave.
Okay, so I'll wait for maybe about 10 seconds and I'll move on. Once you get the answer, you can read it out.
So, no, what she is meaning, sir, for example, the physician comes across an interesting case report pertaining to an adverse event which is relating to a drug. So, they are. You would like to report this in a journal. So, they are publishing the case report. So, in that case, does this need consent from the patient? Of course, if you are going to do that, you need consent, definitely, because it's patient data. I think she's meaning that.
All right. Okay. Yeah, so let's quickly remember that these are the basic principles, what we call in different terms. So basically autonomy, that is respect for a person's wish, or, or giving them the right to make an informed choice or a decision. Right? Then we have beneficence and non-maleficence.
Yes. Let me just break you for a minute.
Sure.
Somebody is asking if in ADR reporting form, no consent needed. So yes, doctor, that is correct. What you are telling is correct. What Arpita is meaning is just an adverse event case report that is getting published by a clinician or by a pharmacologist who goes in rounds in pertaining to academics. But what you are meaning is pertaining to the industry, where patient details are masked as per the HL7 language codes.
Absolutely.
So that's the difference. So, sir, sorry,
Yes.
sir, you can continue.
No,
Yeah,
absolutely. So that's why I came back to. So let's differentiate that from this. And again, if it's a post-marketing surveillance, so there is a different procedure adopted. Here I'm talking about, that's why it's very explicitly mentioned as a part of routine clinical patient care. Now, this is a part of my routine clinical patient care, and I'm already seeing this person. And I found that this was a very different kind of a case, unusual case, and I feel that this needs to be reported, right? So that's the difference. Okay, coming back to this, so there are principles, so beneficence and non-maleficence. That is, doing good is beneficence and non-maleficence. At least do no harm or do the minimal harm what is possible. And justice is being fair, both in the equitable selection of the participants and also trying to give them the benefit that accrue from the research, all that. Now, informed consent as such forms a very important pillar, and that comes from the domain of autonomy or respecting the person's ability to make an informed choice, right? So that's what is the basic tenet, or we can say that that's the principle which it relies on. And when we say respect, obviously it has multiple things which come in. That means they have to make a choice. Now, informed consent, very simply put, is an agreement between the person who's, and we are talking in terms of research right now. Okay, I'm not talking in terms of clinical healthcare, but what I'm talking in terms of is research in this particular webinar. So here the person agrees, the participant, prospective participant agrees to be a part of the study as a participant based on what is provided to him or her. That is a relevant and easily digestible information. All these words are very important. That means I may provide information, but it's so jargon laden that the person is unable to comprehend it. At the same time, I can break it down into simple things where the person is able to understand. Okay. And what is it more important is when I provide that information, particularly there should be information about what does it mean for the person to be a participant, what he or she is entitled to as benefits, and what are the foreseeable risks or harms that I can see in the light of present knowledge, and that has to be informed. And based on this, the person will decide whether to go further and participate or not. So please remember, informed consent is not that document that comes to our mind usually, which is signed and dated and witnessed, but rather it's a process. It's a process where we agree and we give information. So all relevant information is given to the volunteer or the patient or the participant. Uh, the person will understand the information and voluntarily agree to participate. Okay, so it's a basic right of every human being. And that's why when we are doing research, we have to give them this right. Having said this, please remember, once we have given all the information, provided them enough details and answered their queries, given them the choice to decide based on the information or to discuss and then come back. And so once it is done, they agree, then this is documented by a written, signed and dated informed consent form, which is again a legally required thing as well. So if you look at this, the participant information sheet as well as the informed consent form together, ignore that plus after the ICF. So that together forms the informed consent document. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to provide information that is also part of a written thing. And again, in clinical trial, this can be very extensive document. And along with that, we have the form, which is finally signed, dated, and then kept. So this is what is informed consent. Now, what is essential here? So there are certain elements. First and foremost is we need to give them information, disclose it, and it should be simple in their language, and it should be easily understandable, digestible. Now, I may provide information. The patient doesn't understand. The patient doesn't understand. Why? There could be multiple reasons. One, the person's understanding is not so much, or I used too many jargons, or the language was different. All these could be the barriers. So that's why it has to be in the language that the patient understands. Then I have to keep it simple. So all these things. Now all this is fine, but then as I told you in the Alzheimer's lady that, Mrs. Franklin, she did not have the capacity, the mental capacity to consent because she is in that kind of a phase. Now people who are in, say, some mental illness, certain mental illness where they do not have the compos mentis, They cannot. So we cannot take a legally valid consent from them. So that is another thing which we have to remember. And after giving all the information, checking for their understanding, having the capacity to consent, all that, we cannot say that, okay, you better consent. If you don't consent, these are the consequences, tuck, tuck, tuck. Or if you don't, I'm not going to treat you from tomorrow. I'm not going to see you for next 2 months. I'll not give you appointments. What am I doing? I'm trying to coerce. I'm trying to threaten. I'm trying to force the person. Arm twisting tactics. So this is not done. It has to be voluntary based on the information provided, based on what they've understood. So it has to be voluntary. They have the right to decide whether to participate or not. If it's an ongoing thing, they also have the right to withdraw anytime in the middle without any repercussions or any consequences. So that is what is the ideal informed consent. Now, there could be, compromise capability. Like, for example, for an illiterate person, now I hold a form and say that everything is written, read it. The person cannot read it. Or, certain cases like, say, for example, somebody who's got a disability in the hand where the, compromise cannot sign or maybe cannot read. So those kind of things, visually challenged. So then again, if the person is Braille competent, we have to provide Braille, or some other person like, will have to read it out and then explain. And similarly, mentally challenged people are not able to understand. They cannot legally consent, as I told you. Children, on the other hand, are compromised because their understanding may be limited. And again, they do not have the capacity legally to consent. As somebody rightly pointed, assent, I'll come to that towards the end and tell you what assent is. And of course, somebody who's in a coma or unconscious, all these things apply because they cannot give us consent. Now, having said this, on the left, you have the essential elements which must be there when you do a research and you're trying to make a informed consent document. In that, when you're trying to formulate a participant information sheet, you need to have these left side elements which are 1 to 10 numbered. So they have to be there. So what do I mean? There must be a statement mentioning that it is research that they are getting into. Now, why is that important? I mean, it's understood. Why? Because most of the time we play multiple roles, and definitely dual role. I may be a treating physician. I may be the person who's also a researcher. The person who's getting into the research must know that this is not part of the treatment, but it's a research that is being done so that they are aware and we have informed, and then they know that this is something which is different from a routine clinical care. Then, of course, the purpose, the methods which are involved, what are the duration, frequency, any kind of methods, any kind of, foreseeable risk or discomfort that we can think of at the, at the present moment in the available knowledge, whatever we have. And what is the benefit they will get? It need not be always monetary. It can be even, something that we provide them. It could be even sometimes we give them some facilities like in a hospital, a card for 3 months or 6 months. I might give them some basic, facilities. So it could be anything. What benefit they will get, what the community will get, what, some other people will get. So how will it benefit? So that should be there. Is there any kind of a payment which will be given to them? And need not be again a payment always in cash, as I said. It could be a mix. It could be sometimes like, just a benefit, like even creating an awareness. So depending on what the research is, there are different things which can be. You can always clearly say that there is no, money paid or there's no payment or reimbursement done. However, we will give you this, or we will redirect you to some knowledge, or we will be able to support you for something. So that can be, or we'll support your community to create a center in your community where we will be running a free clinic when anybody can come for these. So, I mean, I'm just giving you examples. Very important, confidentiality of records. So whatever the data that you get, whatever information, how is it going to be confidential? Who's going to have access? If it's a physical, who's going to have the access? If it's a online thing, then who's going to have access? So all that, and God forbid something happens, if there is injury which is related to participating in research, what are my plans? What would happen? Will we provide them treatment, any compensation? Of course, in case of death, we have to provide them financial compensation. But otherwise, like, so what will happen? And then they have the freedom of choice to decide whether to participate and withdraw anytime they want, as I said. And then very importantly, most of the time we forget that there has to be some accountability, some owners. So we need to have the identity of the research team and the people who are to be contacted that should be displayed. And based on some different things, like, there could be additional optional elements, like what are the optional procedures additionally available if I don't want to go with this option? Is there insurance coverage? What are the stigmatizing condition, and what could be the harm that may result to me? If I'm using biological, data or markers or something like, some samples, what am I going to do with that? How am I going to preserve it? What is the future use, if at all? So again, please remember, I'm not trying to suggest that blanket consent is acceptable, but we could have sometimes saying that, okay, I'll preserve it for 5 years. Do you want me to connect back with you? Can I use it in future, or do you want me to get back to you for a particular thing? And as I said, if I'm trying to plan and publish some case report or anything, I need to again think of taking consent and what is the plan. So I'm just showing you a few simple things now, and then we'll get back to those cases in some special circumstances. That's my plan. So this is a Google form. I'll enlarging it for you. So you see, again, this is a very simple thing, because we get a barrage of these questionnaires nowadays in our mail as well as on WhatsApp. So again, if you see, here we've said that who we are, what we expect you to do. This has already been approved by the ethics committee of KMC. There are no personal details collected, and we are not going to use any of that for publication or presentation. Again, how is this research going to help us? What are you expected to do? So answer these 23 multiple questions. Okay, and then a few details about yourself, but we don't collect your name or identifier is not required, and you'll remain anonymous all the time. However, we also talk about confidentiality, and we say that this is going to be like, only accessible to people who are authorized from this research, and we will store it in secured servers, which again, some people ask me, what do you mean by that? Again, depends. This is like a Google Forms, it is, but if I have a mechanism or I have my own ways of, again, keeping that secure, so I could have, some cloud space or things. So then again, that can be mentioned if you want to. It will depend on the level. And then there's no expense to you. We don't anticipate any harm. You can refuse participation, all that. And then at the end, what are we going to do? So we're not going to provide you anything, but we will direct you. And this was done in April 2020, the COVID peak time. So then we will direct you to some government websites where you'll get information. If you see the identity of researchers is there. Again, there is also the details of the ethics committee, how they can be contacted. I've given a brief consent, but of course you can make it a little more explicit. And then before they proceed, they need to say yes. Okay, then only they proceed. Now here, what is important is when you design this at the back, at the back end, you can make a setting where if they say yes, they proceed to the questionnaire. If they say no, then it should go to submit. What I've seen many a times is, even after telling this, people design it in such a way that even if I click no, it goes to the questionnaire. So that defeats the purpose. Please don't do that. So it should, when I say no, you see the submit button here, it should go to that. So if I say no, it should go to submit. Now let's look at some of the things which are important. In a case of a differently abled, or what we say Divyang, Jan, so we have to make sure that we are not distinguishing them from any other people. So they also have to be given the rights. They also have to be treated equally, and we have to try and enhance their understanding by providing them some conducive methods. Like in this case, the example given in the ICMR document was for Braille or visually impaired. I do not know what are the other modalities, to be honest, but there could be efforts made to actually try and make sure that they also understand. Most importantly, just because they are a little different, they are specially able, differently able, whatever we may call them, their right doesn't get less or diminished. They also have equal rights. They have the right to discuss with family, friends, and then they can decide. And we should not end up giving any justification or any kind of assurance which we cannot substantiate. So that's very, very important, because that may lead them to participate with false assurances. Again, if I have an illiterate person, then I have to have an impartial literate person who's not connected to my research present throughout the consent process as a witness. And if there is something where is complex, where are sensitive studies, I must also try checking if they are understanding. Because if you remember, what do? Most of the time, if I'm signing up for something, I say, yeah, that's okay, like, let me sign. Or if I'm signing up for, say, Facebook or say Twitter or say Gmail account, I just scroll down and say, I agree. Have I read that fine print? No. Similarly, if you are doing that electronically, especially in the West, they check for understanding by building in some chunks of information and then 1 or 2 questions on the preceding knowledge that has been shared. And then since you have built in those, they have to answer it correctly to proceed to the next chunk. If not, they have to go back, read the previous paragraph, answer those questions, move to the next chunk of information, answer questions. So again, that can be built in as well. When you're doing it face to face, you can check, you can say, can you explain me what did I tell you? Do you have any questions? Okay, summarize what did I tell you? So that's a check of understanding as well. Now, there may be times when people are willing to participate but don't want to sign the dotted line. Can we approve that? So again, ICMR rules say that, ICMR guidelines say that, only in exceptional cases this may be permitted, but who decides? Not me as a researcher, not my team, but I put forth to the ethics committee, and they, in their wisdom, with all the discussion, they will decide whether this could be allowed, right? Again, there is also a thing which says that this process can further be documented by audio or video recording. Now, if you see, there is a challenge here. In the first place, the person is not willing to sign or give a thumb impression, and now I'm saying that this should be documented audio video, right? So for that, again, for audio video recording, I need to actually take a consent, then only I have to proceed. So it can become complicated, but this is what is the procedure. Ideally, I should have inform them. If they are not willing to sign, I'll say, okay, there has to be some way I need to record this. I will have a person who's not connected to you, not connected to me. This person is here. It could be another person in the ward. It could be another person there. So that person will be part of the frame, because I need to show that there was somebody else who was there. As I said, before I proceed, I will obviously have to take consent to record them also, right? What about the reconsent or fresh consent? So if I have some new information becomes available when I'm proceeding, and I'm assuming that this is a long-term trial or research which is going on. So in such a case, I need to again take a fresh consent, giving them the information which has now become available because circumstances have changed. Or I started with the trial or the study. The person was unconscious when I started, now has regained the consciousness. I may have taken a consent from a legally authorized representative or kith or kin, but now the person has regained consciousness, and I'm assuming that the person is an adult. So, or person has regained the mental competence, we need to take consent from that person. Or I started a research when the child was involved, and this is a 5-year research. I started, the child was 15, now has become 18. I need to take consent again. And if I'm trying to exceed the duration that I was planning to, or I'm trying to increase my follow-up duration for another 1 or 2 years or whatever, I need to take a fresh consent that they are willing to be a part of that. They don't want to just stop at whatever original plan was. Or I change anything like, procedure, modality of treatment, visits, data collection, then I need to take a fresh consent. Now, this is applicable again for publication. So if at all, in some way, I'm going to breach or disclose the identity, as somebody rightly said at that time, I definitely need to have a consent, fresh consent. Again, please remember, even after that, I need to camouflage. So you would have seen that black bands which run across the face and the eyes too. Now, some of you, in case you are ophthalmologists, you will say that I need to show the eye. Yes, then in that case, you just do that. You remove the other parts, like you don't project the full face then in that case, right? And exceptional times or sometimes you might have to take partner or spouse consent also. Now, there are some specific and special circumstances. If you remember the case I talked about in the school, I said that I will send the form home and I'll wait for the parents to send me if they don't want their child to participate. In case they don't send it back, I assume that they are willing their child to be participating. That's nothing but an example of a passive consent. Or in other words, it's also known as opt-out consent. What do I mean? That means the person is opting out actively. Okay. If I don't opt out, it is a passive assumed consent. So passive consent. Again, there are certain conditions where I can do that. Surrogate. That means somebody else. If you remember, surrogate was used in terms of a surrogate pregnancy. So similarly, surrogate is somebody else, right? So surrogate is a kith or kin or a legally authorized representative. Again, in case of not just the mental competence, as I said, like, certain cases we might require a person to consent, surrogate consent. So somebody else will consent for that person. Mental illness, certain things where waiver of consent I will come to. So let's see. And is there something known as community consent? So community consent is kind of misnomer, I would say, though this terminology exists, but it's something like gatekeepers. There are some sarpanch or there are some village tribal chief or something like that. Until you get them on your side, until they approve, you are not able to enter that area. So that is what is community consent. Now, if you look at this again, this is the third case I was talking about. So in the school, I have given options of treatment and scaling if there is a need. Again, this is optional. They don't have to compulsorily go, but again, it's given to them, advice is given, which would have been the case otherwise also. And again, need not sign and return if they are all right with their child participating. This is an example of passive consent. So when can you give passive consent? So this can be given in certain cases where you think that the harm is less than minimal. And in this, as I said, this is a part of routine. Again, you're not actively intervening, you're not doing a procedure, you're not doing any kind of intervention. So here probably you can. Ethics committee again has to allow. If the ethics committee still feels, and again there could be some ethics committee which are a little more conservative, they'll say that okay, we don't want to, you have to take consent, active consent. So again, that researcher or team has to follow it. Okay. Coming back to this, as I said, we need to have the kith or kin, the surrogate giving us, the approval. So in this case, she's not mentally sound also, so we cannot. What about waiver? So waiver can be granted in a few situations as mentioned here by the ICMR. So they said that when we know that there is no possibility of the research being carried out if I don't give a waiver, and the waiver is scientifically justified. Let's take an example of that CSWs, the commercial sex workers. It's a very sensitive topic. Again, they may be scared about their identity, the repercussions and things like that. However, it's important for us to know what are the practices about safe sex. It's scientifically sound study. Of course, we'll have to go to the protocol, but I'm assuming it is. And if I don't really get that waiver, probably I may have difficulty in recruiting the participants, right? Or sometimes if I have some studies where the participants are not identified, they are de-identified, or I cannot contact them, right? Or there are samples lying. Now what I can do is I disconnect their identifiable data. So anonymize samples. In that case, I can have a waiver of consent. As I said, if they cannot be contacted, and that's why I twisted that scenario and I said that 10 years back and some of them are not available or I don't have their contact details. So that's what I was trying to say. Again, in cases where I have already a public health program running or surveillance, like for example, we have these malnutrition related programs, or we have these immunization program like oral polio and a pulse polio. Such things, again, I'm not going to individual level data, but I'm going to have a aggregate data. Or there are certain things which are available in public domain. For example, census data. You and I can access it. I want to take that and then try to do some research. I want to see some faces. Okay, if there are people who are educated and how they behave, or maybe something like that. Or for example, National Family Health Survey data. So in that case, I can take, again, I'm not going to break it down into individual level, but it's a group data and I don't have any identifiers there. So that can be done. And again, in cases where we have a humanitarian emergency, some disasters, but in that case, it's advised that as soon as possible, we try to get the person's consent. So here, as I said, in this case, there is a possibility I can give a waiver, provided those conditions are met. And there are certain other things like, of course, it's important that we get a voluntary informed consent. But in this case, again, if I think that there is no more than minimal risk, or in case you see that the participant and the researcher are not coming in the contact, or probably there is an emergency situation, in such case, a waiver probably, and it's scientifically justified that there are safeguards which are there. There are protection in place to afford privacy and confidentiality, and we are not violating in any way the rights of the participant. If the ethics committee is already satisfied of all these things, then they may allow a waiver and waiver can be granted. Again, these are some of the places where in public health research also they have said that the waiver may be granted. They say that, there are certain times when the program conditions are there and that we are taking a data and there is no linkages. It's only a gross overall data of, representative data of a population, or sometimes it's like, impractical to get that consent, or it's a stored sample. We have linked it or anonymized it. So in such cases, or sometimes there is like, regulatory and public health authorities are doing some national policy or a program, as I gave you examples. So in such cases, yes, okay. Or if I'm trying to improve my public health systems and surveillance. They've also talked about electronic consent, especially in the light of COVID-19 pandemic, and said that yes, it can be allowed, and there are multiple ways we can take it. You can use, interactive websites, audio, video, graphics, and all that, and it can be done. As I said, community consent, there's nothing like that, but then it's more of the gatekeepers. But please remember, even after that, individual consent is important. So you got the permission. I'll give you another example, deviating a bit. If I go to a school, principal cannot give me a consent on behalf of any student. Or if I go to a hostel, even a professional college hostel, the warden or the institution head cannot give me permission or consent. I mean, can give me only permission, not consent. The consent has to be given by that person or their parent, as the case may be, right? So community consent is something similar, but as I said, it's more of a misnomer, I would say. Coming to assent. So in children, we need to take assent. And in India, as per ICMR, children between 7 to 18, if we enroll, we need to take assent. Again, in 7 to 18, it's a broad age group, but what we are doing is we are again demarcating. So 7 to 12, we take a verbal assent. And 12 to 18, we take a written assent. So what is this assent I'm talking about? So assent is a very simplified version of consent. So what I'm doing is whatever information I was giving in consent, and if it's an adult, here since it's a child, there is a limited understanding, the vocabulary is limited, so I'll have to break it down and make it simple, and I'll have to make it understandable to the child. And I need to obtain his or her assent. Now, does that mean that if I have taken assent from the child, I don't need a consent of the parent or legally authorized representative? Absolutely wrong. We need to take the consent of the parent or the legally authorized representative as well, even if we have taken the assent. But please remember, this follows a kind of a all or none phenomenon. That means you need assent as well as consent. Both should be tick, tick, checkbox. If you do not get an assent, try. If you don't, even if the parent consents, you cannot proceed, ideally speaking. The child agrees, gives you assent, parent disagrees, you cannot proceed. So you need to have both. And again, in this case, they say that electronic, online, depending on, situations, safeguarding their information and, other things met, you can. But please remember, individual consent is important and required. Even if we have the community which gives us permission for participation, we need to have individual consent. And of course, there are multiple other things which are there. So sometimes if the other parent is not there or not available or they are separated or whatever, so in such cases, one parent's consent is also acceptable. Okay. Usually, if it's less than minimal risk, again, we can take that. But if you think that there could be harm or there is like something which is more invasive, it is advisable to have both parents' consent. So we'll stop here. I'll take a few questions if you have now before I summarize with an interesting kind of a graphic, and then we'll close. So we have a couple of minutes again.
Thank you, sir, for that. It was fantastic to listen.
Thank
as
you.
usual. Yeah. It's very pleasing to the ears. The serenity with which you speak, it's very nice. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you for kind words.
So please, audience, if you have any questions, you can get it clarified. Because there cannot be a better person who can clarify your doubts. Because I asked my doubts to him.
No, thank you. You're being generous.
Go ahead, Surya, Rashmi, Arpita. You guys were interactive in the beginning. Now it's time to be more interactive.
Yes. I hope I have given some answers as well, as I stimulated you in the beginning. So that's why I'd like, and then I tried to go through those things and give you some answers.
So I think you can move ahead, sir. No problems.
Yeah. All right. So this is what I want to show you, courtesy my former additional dean, Dr. Alfred. He talked about consent and likened it to fries and said that, of course, I'm not trying to give a message that we should be having unhealthy diet or, should not be calorie conscious. But then fries is, expanded as consent is something which is freely given. Please remember that is voluntary. OK, and it's reversible. So that's why I said no blanket. And at the same time, so blanket is specific, obviously, but reversible means I can take it back anytime. So I have given, I say, no, now I don't want to continue. So reversible. It's informed. It's based on the information that is provided to me, and I'm enthusiastically giving it. And it's very specific. It's not blanket. So remember, I love fries, and that's what is consent. So thank you for being so good and nice. Very good. Let's see. Bring them on.
If we have a subject of unmarried pregnant women, what should we do about it?
All right. So I'm assuming that this is not research, or is it? I mean, can you please clarify that?
The person has to answer that Rucha for clinical research.
Yeah, so because that's what is it research or so? Because if it's research, then I would like to know what research is this, and then unmarried pregnant, and so what kind of research? What are
biomedical observational research? She says.
Okay.
So it's just an observational study which is done in academics, probably.
All right. So in such a case, like what exactly is the research about? I'm not able to clearly understand.
So Rucha, the question is good question, but we want to know in which topic you are doing, therapeutic area you are into. So some details about the study, if you can throw some light.
Yes.
Good evening. This is Rucha from Nagpur. Basically, if we want to enroll such patient like unmarried pregnant women for any observational study, like we want to observe her blood group, or we want to observe her genetic test, or we want to just study about her any of the observation like ectopic pregnancy or any APH, like a simple thing which is happening in the which is done in the pregnancy. Any adverse event in the pregnancy related.
Got it. Just a moment. Please answer my question. So what is it that you're trying to look at this particular group? You said that specifically, and I'm assuming that you're taking all unmarried pregnant women as your participants. If I'm right in assuming that, is that correct?
No, sir. Actually, one case is from unmarried. We are taking for blood. We are observing the blood groups and for the RH factors. But one unmarried girl is there. She is she's pregnant. Okay, so can we take a consent of her, and can we take a participant as a participant?
The cohort includes the pregnant woman, and they are typing RH typing they are doing as an observational study. So let's assume that there are 50 participants. Among that, one participant is pregnant, but when you go back and date her history, she's unmarried.
Okay, so again, let me again break it down. So I'm assuming that in your inclusion and exclusion criteria, you would have put forth some certain things. One.
Yeah.
Second, again, this unmarried pregnant lady, I'm assuming that she's continuing with your, with the pregnancy and she is eligible to be a participant in your research. Third thing, again, please remember that there could be issues legally as well as medical legally in this case. So you'll have to be aware of that. Again, it depends on what's the objective of your research. If you feel that she satisfies the eligibility criteria, she is adult. I'm assuming again that she is not underage, though she is pregnant and but she's not underage. It's not a result of something like a statutory rape or something where there is not some issue really. So again, because unmarried is more of a social issue. If it was like if you had told me that she is unmarried 16-year-old pregnant lady, I would be again alarmed and I'll say that no, and then again legal course will take this thing because it becomes a lot of things, including a POXO Act coming into picture, MTP Act coming. Ideally speaking, she should not continue with pregnancy because that's what the law of the land will say, and then there are issues. But here I'm assuming that she is of age, she has been pregnant, she's not married, that's the only issue, and she satisfies the eligibility criteria. And if you think, probably you can enroll, of course, provided that you have the consent in place. Right. And again, you're not isolating because see, your research is based on pregnant women and some whatever your research question. And you're not going to tomorrow project the data that, OK, say XYZ, this lady or ABC lady was unmarried pregnant women who took part in this research. Immaterial. Right. Okay. So if I'm looking at it objectively, that the issue is about consent and the eligibility. I mean, if she fits and if she's all right, I can go ahead.
Okay, sir.
But would you think in any way this will provide, this participation will prove a threat to her in her continuing pregnancy, or will this lead to some, exaggerated complications or something like that? In such a case, I would say no, you don't go ahead. But if that is not the case, you may go ahead, provided you take all the steps that you would take for taking consent. I hope I have answered.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you
very much. So
Thank
the second question is,
some postgraduate. Okay.
No, there is another question. Maybe we know what are the peculiar or sensitive challenges you came through in your experience.
Okay. I mean, it's very difficult to recollect, and I do not really remember and recollect all these. But yeah, there are times when it keeps happening, and that's why, and I get enriched with questions like this, this was one of them right now, that unmarried pregnant lady, but yeah, I mean, I can't recollect, to be honest. I'll have to think.
So maybe we can take it later.
We can connect again sometime, or maybe
For a study on substance use disorder in adolescents, so age group is 12 to 18 years, can we get waiver of consent from parent as it might affect the response from the participants?
Okay, so very interesting. Again, it's a very, very sensitive topic. Okay, and this can have repercussions and ramifications. So I do not really think that an ethics committee will give you a waiver of consent. Okay, now again, what we are assuming, and at least I'm assuming, is that you're trying to do a research on substance use disorders in adolescents. I'm not presuming that all of them are already substance user. I hope I'm assuming it right. If that is the case, then I would say that no, I would not. And if I was sitting in the committee, I would say that no, I would rather have you to take the consent from parents, and you can assure confidentiality and privacy to the people. You can have it in different ways. You can give them, ways where they will not be revealing their identity and you will collect data from them. It could be multiple ways. Simple way, very simply put, forget about any technology, Google and all. You can even have them at one place if at all. And if you want to give them a paper and then survey form, they can, and they drop it in a Dropbox or, a place where you've kept. And then you don't know who's dropped what form. So you have, say, 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, everybody drops there, and then you got the responses. They don't have the scare of, revealing their identity. because out of the 50, you don't know whose form is what, right? That's one. So I would say that no, in such a case, you don't really need to, because you would rather have, since these are adolescents, these are under the age, so you will rather have consent, because tomorrow, in case like, something goes wrong, I do not want you to be the wrong side of the law. You may argue that, okay, I'm not going to collect any data anyway from them to identify them. Yes, agreed. But tomorrow, if you are saying, and if you have a particular group or you have reached out to a particular, say, community, and tomorrow if you say that I had done this research here and this was the prevalence, and tomorrow there is some repercussion, there could be issues. So yes, I would say that I would rather say that you would take it.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Next question, the postgraduate thesis question now. It's involving children between 7 to 12. Yeah, that is the adolescents as well as the children age group. Is assent compulsory apart from IC from parents? It is compulsory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have already said that, so I repeat. Yes, and in 7 to 12.
There is a follow-up question for that. If yes,
how to document
it? Yeah.
So yes, so assent is very simplified document. Okay, you will have things which are there in the information sheet, and you will also have that, okay, I agree, hereby agree, and so those things will be there. So that will be, if it is a 12 to 18, it will be written. That means the person, the student, the child will have to sign it, okay, with somebody witnessing, and then you will, so that's how you document, and the parent consent will be consent. But if it's a 7 to 12, you will have somebody witnessing, and you will be asking, explaining, and then taking their approval, and you will document saying that I have explained to this person and all that. So you can do it that way, and then because 7 to 12, it's only a verbal. Yeah. If you want, you can even do it in the presence of the parent. That makes it even better, and then you can get the parent to say that yes, I agree, and then you can say that even the child has been informed and assent obtained, and the parent can countersign for you.
Yeah, the last question is, what is a two-tier consent? I mean, they're asking about the 2-stage of consents.
Okay, so yeah. I don't think what exactly it means. I'm not very clear.
Maybe I can answer that. So it is nothing but seeking an oral assent, participation during the critical time period, and then followed by a written consent.
Written consent. Okay.
Yeah. That's what
or for example, the other thing which comes to mind is, or even for certain regulatory trials where you have to video record. So you can't straight away video record them, right? In fact, India is the only country which mandates that you have to video record. Okay, so in that case, you will have to take a consent for first video recording, and then you have to take again, and you have to go on record and say that, okay, I have consent, and this is what I'm like, getting into, and you will explain, and the person will say, and then you would have recorded that. So before that, before recording, you've taken so that is also one, in a way, two-tier.
Yeah, exactly, sir. Yeah, thank you very much. So any other questions, guys? I think it was a good session. So see, it's a common topic, but it's the way how we do the webinars. Many people talk, but I always felt that when Dr. Animesh sir speaks, the reach is better. No, sir, it's about the teacher, how they teach, right? So you see, certain points which you tell, it always stays in the mind, which is very important.
Right.
Because people think that these are all not preliminary things that we need to know as an academician or from an industry, but I feel that this is the most important need of the hour, to know all these things.
So I'll take one more minute, Dr. Balaji, if you permit me.
Sure, sir. And there is one more question also. Yeah.
Okay. So till then, you can read out the question. I'm just trying to project something.
Yeah. Do we have to mention a point in ICF that the assent has been taken from the child 7 to 12?
Okay. So
yeah,
you can do that.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead, sir. No
so
problem.
what I'm projecting is, see, this was some time back. There was a discussion on one of the social media platforms. Okay. Of course, many a times some of us actually want to, like, share and help our fellow colleagues. Now, I have masked this. This was not masked already. You see, And there was somebody, now there is so much of already awareness, and somebody like, digressed. Instead of going into the technicalities and the subject matter, it became like, did you get patient's consent to share this on the social media? And then all that, like, very fair question somebody says that it should have like consent taken. Did you take it specifically that you're going to share it in social media and Twitter and things like that? So you see, all this is also coming in now. So we have to be mindful, because sometimes what we do is we just take it for granted that, yeah, just because the person happens to be my patient in the, say, government hospital or under me, or a poor patient, we just do that. So I just wanted to share that. Of course, it's not a part of research, but this also is one of the scenarios that we have to keep in mind. So I just thought I'll just share that, because I mean, I'm just interested in these kind of things. So I just keep picking whenever I see some, and then I try and use it for, wherever there is an opportunity to sensitize my students, or just share it in forums where I will use it for discussion.
Yeah. So the question was, sir, do we have to mention a point in ICF? I think.
So you can mention it. I mean, there's no harm in that. You can always do, as I said, you would document it anywhere there. So, but you can do that if you want to.
Yeah, correct. Because recently also we did one pediatric trial where we didn't make it a point to mention it, but because it was an annexure and we had submitted the assent forms and informed consent documents along with the PIS, but they did come back and say it can be mentioned in the ICF also. That was a query.
Yes.
So
yes, absolutely, it can
be.
It can be this, absolutely. Right. So I think we are already a little overboard. If
Yes,
it's
sir.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we are done. Let's wrap it
Thank
up.
You.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think you need to relax a bit today.
Yeah, been a long day. It's
yes,
more
sir.
than
Thank you very much.
Years.
And we would always love to have you in the forum of DTRAS Global. Of course, you're a great friend of mine, and more than that, my professor. So I have immense respect for you, sir. Thank you very much.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, guys, everybody, for joining the webinar. See you next week.
Yes.